In the late 1700s, a former Navy navigator named William Morris set out on a daring voyage crossing the Antarctic ice walls, uncharted territory that no sailor had ever returned from. What he found there wasn't just a new world. It was the key to understanding humanity's forgotten past. William encountered advanced civilizations, uncovered ancient secrets, and learned of powers that have shaped our reality without us ever knowing. But to understand his incredible story, we must start from the beginning. As a Continental Navy man during the Revolutionary War, William had left behind his wife Lucy and the life they dreamed of building together. War, as always, tore through those dreams, replacing them with the pain of separation. One night after Saratoga's surrender, his ship was bound for Charleston under a full moon, the Atlantic stretching in ghostly silence. To calm the anxiety of war, the crew swapped stories over whiskey. Soon, talk drifted to Captain James Cook and his fixation with crossing the Antarctic Circle. The source of Cook's obsession was a mystery, and while William didn't give it much thought at first, he couldn't help but listen when his own Captain Butler spoke up. Butler's voice was calm but resolute. "There may be a passage somewhere in the polar circle," he said, "a gateway to lands beyond." His tone held no hint of jest. The cabin fell silent, every man waiting for the punchline that never came. Butler claimed he had high-level sources confirming that expeditions were being funded to break through the harsh southern climate to reach what lay beyond the ice. He himself had seen a map that marked coordinates for such a passage. The idea felt impossible, yet it left William haunted as he drifted into an uneasy sleep. Years later, with the war over, many Navy ships were dismantled or sold. William, now comfortably situated, decided to purchase one of them, a decision that drew plenty of laughter from his friends. But the memory of Butler's story lingered, sparking an unshakable urge to explore. Lucy was hesitant, but William was determined. By November, he had a crew ready, though most had turned down the offer with understandable reluctance. Only two of his friends from that fateful night were eager to join him. Convincing Butler himself was a different story. For weeks, William wrestled with how to approach him, knowing that Butler's experience and those coordinates were crucial. When he finally asked, Butler showed interest but declined. Then, on October 11th, Butler appeared at William's door, unannounced and holding maps William had never seen. With him was a man named Fint, and they both looked as if they had come from another world. "I'll join you," Butler said, "but understand this could be a one-way trip." William nodded. He realized then that this journey was no longer a distant fantasy. It was a professional mission, one that demanded everything he had. The adventure was about to begin. After setting November 14th as their departure date, William and his crew worked tirelessly, filled with a mix of anticipation and unease. Every detail was meticulously planned, and Butler's mysterious partner, Fint, had joined the team. But as the days crept closer, an ominous tension grew. They spoke of adventures, but no one knew that the journey would surpass any fiction they had imagined. 2 days before departure, William heard a sharp knock at his door. Fint stood there, accompanied by a stranger dressed in black, his expression severe, his voice edged with a strange accent. "This is urgent," he said. William hesitated, then allowed them inside. Fint opened a worn briefcase and pulled out an old manuscript, its pages brittle and lined with foreign script. In a low, solemn tone, he read aloud, "By demand, I subscribe in major importance, here by desire of our lords, that the doors of knowledge be closed to those who refused our path." William felt a chill settle over him. "This sounds like some sort of initiation rite," he muttered half to himself. "Exactly," Fint replied. "Those who do not pass the initiation are outcasts. We are outcasts." Frustrated, William demanded, "What does this mean?" What does it have to do with our trip? Fint's expression darkened. The manuscript belongs to the custodians, the sun gods, as they call themselves. They know about our journey thanks to Butler, and they aren't pleased. This decree states that no one is to leave these lands without their permission. The air in the room grew thick. William, already prepared for the natural dangers of the journey, now found himself confronting an invisible, powerful enemy. "Who are these custodians?" he pressed. Before Fint could answer, the stranger spoke. "They are not happy about your voyage," he said cryptically. "That's all you need to know." Fint urged him to cancel the trip, warning, "It's not worth risking your life." William, angered by their cryptic threats, ordered them to leave immediately. Yet as they left, a deep unease lingered. When William tried to reach Butler to make sense of the strange encounter, he received only silence. As his team gathered to discuss the unsettling developments, they realized that Butler had been missing for days. The situation grew dire. Without Butler, their plan seemed doomed. Walter, a fellow sailor, mentioned he'd heard vague stories about the custodians, but could offer nothing more. Reluctantly, they postponed the trip, their plans unraveling as Butler's absence stretched into weeks. November 14th arrived with no hope left. Then that morning there was a knock on William's door. To his astonishment, Butler stood there, his arms full of supplies, his expression untroubled. "It's time to leave, comrade," he said, as if nothing had happened. Stunned, William bombarded him with questions, recounting the strange visit from Fint and his warnings. Butler's expression grew cold. "It was necessary," he replied. "I had to disappear to secure this." He unfurled a large map, covering the table in William's living room. William's breath caught. On the map lay vast, uncharted lands beyond anything he'd ever known. "Do you know the custodians?" William asked. Butler nodded grimly. "The story we know isn't the whole truth," he said. "They're the ancient ones, builders of the pyramids, the so-called custodians. They have no desire to let us cross the South Pole." He explained that Fint had betrayed them, alerting the custodians of their journey. "If we don't leave today, we may never have the chance," Butler warned. With a surge of urgency, William gathered the crew. Once assembled, they departed from Charleston, heading southward into the unknown, each man silently aware that their lives, and the truth they sought, would never be the same. The plan was straightforward: reach the cold Antarctic waters in 140 days, stopping to restock along the way. But the mood on board was tense. Butler's mysterious disappearance before departure, and his talk of another race, left an unsettling question. What force had they challenged by embarking on this journey? Days passed smoothly, with the crew buoyed by good weather and plenty of supplies. They crossed the equator, the tropical heat almost stifling their focus on the icy lands ahead. At Butler's urging, they gathered additional provisions, knowing the journey might stretch longer than anticipated. The air grew heavier as they drew nearer to the unknown south. One clear night, with only the sound of waves for company, William stood on deck, thoughts drifting to the mysteries ahead and the familiar world left behind. Was it worth facing whatever unknown power lay ahead? Butler approached, interrupting his thoughts. "Getting cold, comrade." Butler's tone was cryptic. "You can't imagine what awaits you." "You've been there?" William pressed. "I have," Butler replied simply, his gaze fixed on the southern horizon. "I saw the passage myself." William's questions rose, but Butler held up a hand. "In time, you'll see it too," he said, "and you won't believe what's beyond it." Days turned into weeks, and as they reached the southern seas, the difference was stark. The water darkened, waves towering higher, shadows cast by icebergs looming like silent guardians. A storm lashed at them relentlessly, but Butler's calm held them steady, giving the crew a thin thread of confidence as the howling winds beat against their resolve. They sailed alongside a towering wall of ice, rising nearly 90 meters, its jagged edges casting an eerie, flickering glow of red and yellow from the sun's low rays, as if an unseen fire burned behind it. The crew named their ship The Secret, feeling that only such a name suited the silent, beautiful desolation that surrounded them. As they approached the icy mountain, strange warmth radiated from its melting slopes, causing the snow to cascade into the sea. The contrast of warmth against the bitter cold felt wrong, almost unnatural. Butler ordered them to stay close to the wall, intrigued by the heat radiating from such a cold, lifeless place. Then, without warning, Butler called William to the deck. "Look there," he said, his voice thick with something between awe and urgency. Ahead, a passage had opened in the ice, a narrow, mysterious path cutting between towering walls. The crew's excitement was electric as Butler steered them toward it, his movements precise, like a man who knew exactly what he was doing. They entered the passage, an invisible current seizing the ship and pulling it forward with a force that took their breath away. Fear held each man still as they brushed the icy walls, narrowly avoiding disaster. Minutes stretched into an eternity until suddenly calm fell. The storm had ceased. Though the cold still bit, it was now gentle, bearable. The passage widened, giving way to an open, untouched sea. Butler's voice broke the silence. "We made it!" he cried, his tone triumphant. The crew erupted in amazement, gazing out over waters they had never dreamed existed. As the ice walls faded into the distance and the waters lightened, Butler gathered the men. His face was serious. "What I'm about to share with you now isn't just about us," he began. "It's about humanity, its past and its true story, one that very few know." As the crew stood silent, waiting for Butler to speak, a colossal craft appeared on the horizon, heading straight for them. One of the men climbed up for a better view, then scrambled down in alarm. "They're coming toward us," he gasped. "It's gigantic." Butler, usually calm, looked uncharacteristically tense. "Hold steady," he ordered, though a hint of nerves crept into his voice. The craft drew closer, its dark, reddish surface glinting ominously under the cold light. William's heart raced. He had thought they were alone in these waters, but it seemed they were not. Suddenly, a deafening horn echoed across the sea, followed by a voice in perfect English. "Visitors from the walled lands, remain calm. Our men are coming aboard. We mean you no harm." William's mind raced. Who were these people? He braced himself as three figures in white suits, marked by blue emblems, boarded the ship. One of them, a tall man, shook Butler's hand, his expression respectful yet cautious. "What brings you across the wall?" the man asked, studying them. Butler replied smoothly, explaining how a current had brought them to this side of the Antarctic Circle. William watched the exchange with growing unease. He sensed a familiarity between Butler and their visitors, though he couldn't understand it. The man exchanged glances with his companions. "It's been a long time since anyone crossed the walls," he said, almost to himself. He handed Butler a map. "Follow this to reach safe lands." William spoke up, unable to hold back. "Safe lands? Are there unsafe ones?" The man behind him gave a grim smile. "The lands you came from are less secure." He looked at Butler. "Stay on course, and you'll reach the Republic." The men left as quickly as they'd arrived, leaving a silence heavy with unspoken threats. Butler rallied the stunned crew. "We need to follow their instructions," he urged. "We've crossed into dangerous waters. There are forces who would rather we didn't know what lies beyond the ice." They sailed on for days, tension thick in the air. Butler remained tight-lipped, dodging questions, though his tone grew grave as he reminded them of the powerful interests that opposed their journey. "Stay alert," he warned. We're in a war zone, whether we see the enemy or not. After weeks of rough seas, the cold began to ease, replaced by a milder climate. Birds appeared, vegetation floated on the water, and a sense of discovery replaced their fear. On a dark night, lights appeared on the horizon, a sprawling city, illuminated and surreal. Docking at the port, they were greeted by uniformed officials who introduced the city as part of the ancestral republic. Butler spoke on behalf of the crew, but William's mind was spinning with questions. Before he could ask, one of the agents announced that the Republic's president wished to meet him immediately. William followed the agent through a brightly lit city, amazed at the technology and the silence. No horses, no carriages, only quiet, light-filled streets. They reached a large stone building marked Presidential Office, where a man introduced himself as President Fail. "Mr. Morris," Fail began, "I wish you'd arrived under better circumstances." He sighed. "Your journey through the wall has complicated things. I'll be brief. We're in the midst of an ancient war, and your people are part of what we call the old humanity." William's confusion grew. "Old humanity?" he asked. Fail nodded gravely. "There have been many resets. When those in power feel threatened, they aboot humanity, wiping out most of the population and leaving only the youngest to repopulate. Your crossing risks drawing their attention, exposing our lands and everything we've worked to protect." Stunned and reeling, William could barely comprehend what he'd heard. As he was escorted back to the ship, his mind spun with the weight of this revelation. Back on deck, he shared the president's words with the crew. They were just beginning to process it all when a sudden explosion shattered the night. The ground shook, and the city's alarms wailed as flames and chaos erupted around them. What happened was that the enemy had reached the ancestral republic. The chaos around William was overwhelming. In stunned silence, he took in the sight of the city under siege, people trapped under rubble, desperate cries mingling with the distant sounds of crossfire. Small silver spheres with red lights hovered above, observing the devastation, their purpose and allegiance unknown. "We have to get to the presidential office," shouted a nearby voice over the din. William, barely able to process the destruction, forced himself to move, helping others along the way. A deep red sky loomed overhead, dark as if in eclipse, adding an eerie glow to the ruined cityscape. He looked up, struck by the strangeness of this sky. Who controls these spheres? He wondered. Once inside the presidential office, he realized he'd lost his team amid the chaos. His training in the Continental Navy kicked in, and he felt compelled to help defend the city. Wounded civilians crowded every corner, and the sight of their suffering fueled his resolve. Just then, he saw Butler and President Fail across the crowded hall. Relief washed over him, and he approached, saluting them. Fail's face was tense, his voice strained as he issued commands into a small communicator. "We need support from the Anakim," a voice on the other end repeated. This was a planned attack. Butler's gaze was steady as he turned to William. "They're calling the giant warriors of the South," he said. William's mind reeled, but Fail added with reverence, "They're not only warriors. They're the ones who brought us here before the last reset." Fail abruptly excused himself, leaving William with Butler. "Follow me," Butler ordered, guiding him through the crowded corridors. "We need to rest and gather the team for our next destination." A question burned in William's mind. "Where are we going?" he asked. Butler's expression softened. "It's time you knew the truth," he said. "I belong to these lands, William. I carry the blood of the ancients. What you've seen here today, it's a continuation of a war that began long before us. We're going to the lands of the Anakim, the ones who helped cross the ice walls long ago." Without another word, Butler slipped away into the sea of agents. William, left in shock, lay down on the nearest cot, though sleep was impossible. The images of destruction haunted him, and a new understanding took hold. He had left behind a world shrouded in darkness, and now he was part of a fight for a humanity that had survived the unknown, a humanity whose story had never been told. After a fitful sleep filled with distant explosions and dark thoughts, William was jolted awake by Butler's voice. "Up, William, it's time to move." The captain's tone was firm, almost urgent. Groggy, William barely had time to grasp the gravity of their situation. An enemy was attacking, though he still barely understood who or why. The team regrouped, relieved to see each other alive. They moved quickly through the eerily empty corridors toward the city's evacuation point. One of the men whispered to William, "We saw massive trains and ships overhead, taking people away at incredible speeds." Butler urged them on. "We're boarding one of those ships in 12 minutes. Questions can wait until we reach safe lands." Dodging debris in the deserted streets, William glanced up at the sky. The small spheres were gone, replaced by massive blue triangles streaking across the heavens, darting like swift, silent birds. He couldn't look away, but Butler tugged him back. "Focus, William. Those iron blues are on our side. They're driving the enemy back." When they reached the launch site, agents directed them onto a silver platform that whisked them to a towering vessel. The view was surreal, flames and smoke on one side, a sprawling advanced city gleaming on the other. Butler glanced at the sky, murmuring, "Like a scene from the portraits of Nuremberg." They entered a large blue ship, its interior spacious and sleek. William took a seat beside Butler, who urged them to relax. As the vessel surged forward, one crew member fainted, revived moments later. William gripped his seat, the powerful, silent motion unsettling him, while Butler reassured him with a steady gaze. They traveled through tunnels that plunged them into darkness before emerging over lush fields and endless orchards surrounding the distant city of Renata. The land was beautiful, vibrant with life. Gazing out, William thought he glimpsed a glimpse of Eden, a stark contrast to the chaos behind them. Butler broke the silence, his tone grim. "They poison the air there, William. The custodian's goal is to shorten lifespans, ensuring generations die young and unquestioning." William stared at him, stunned. "You mean they're controlling us by weakening us?" Butler nodded. "Here, people live 3 times longer, but even here, the custodians have tried to infiltrate, attempting to shorten our lives to gain control. This is why we fight." The ship arrived at the capital called the Ark, or El Arca, with no delay. Stepping onto the platform, William felt overwhelmed by the sight. Towering structures of glass and steel, glowing softly under the most breathtaking sunset he'd ever seen. Flying transports glided silently overhead, and the air itself was calm. This city was a vision of what humanity could be, free of the custodian's shadow. Its sleek towers and busy streets were filled with people, all moving in effortless harmony. Butler led the team through the city, his pace brisk, never looking back. They struggled to keep up, entranced by the floating vehicles and glass spheres in the sky, each carrying passengers who drifted above with ease. Despite the distant war, the city's energy was calm, as if untouched by the chaos beyond its borders. William's mind was racing with questions. Who were the Anakim? And the strange language spoken here, was it ancient, a remnant of another humanity? They reached a massive harbor, and Butler motioned them to wait as he spoke with the officers. The team exchanged uneasy glances, whispering about the strange new world they had stumbled into, and wondering if the custodian's wrath followed them here. After a moment, Butler returned. "We're taking that vessel," he said, pointing to a sleek ship docked nearby. "It's similar to the one that found us beyond the ice. First, we'll stop at my home island, then on to the Anakim lands." On board, William marveled at the advanced technology. The ship glided silently, and the water below was unusually calm. The skies, however, seemed different from home. The sun's light was sharper, and another bluish-black sphere hung in the sky, static yet distinct. They sailed at an extraordinary speed, arriving swiftly at Butler's Island. There, on the simple but beautiful shore, a young girl ran into Butler's arms, and a woman stood nearby, her smile soft and welcoming. "Welcome to my home, comrades," Butler said, introducing his family. They settled into nearby houses and for 2 nights enjoyed a rare calm, though William's mind remained restless. One evening, as they watched the sunset, William finally asked the question gnawing at him. Butler's gaze remained distant. "They've conditioned your minds, William," he said. "The custodians have created a world of constant mental noise, making humans dependent on fleeting thoughts and perceptions. They've cut you off from true human essence, distracting you with endless conflict and fear." William listened, struggling to process it. "Our history is hidden," Butler continued. "If people knew the truth, they wouldn't live bound by invisible chains, kept ignorant by those who wish to control them." William fell silent, absorbing the weight of Butler's words, his heart heavy with realization. That night the sky felt vast and endless, holding secrets he was only beginning to uncover. The next morning, under the strange sun, they set sail for the lands of the Anakim, ready to confront whatever lay ahead. The journey to the shifting islands of Thoth was marked by an unusual, unending twilight, with only a faint transition from day to night. A pale, full moon hung in the sky, casting a glow that barely faded as they sailed on. Iron blue ships occasionally streaked across the sky, silent watchers on their path. Arriving at the port of Thoth, William noted its military air. Larger ships bristling with strange weaponry lined the docks. As they disembarked, a tall man with a long red beard and a striking woman with golden hair greeted them. While not towering, they were still imposing, standing over 2 meters tall. The woman, who introduced herself as Shiki, spoke their language, though with a curious ancient inflection. The group followed Shiki into the heart of the village, filled with towering domes and statues of giants, all overlooking lush landscapes and shimmering waters. William's mind raced. Only weeks ago, such sights would have left him speechless, yet here he stood among the giants, the mythical beings of Thoth. Butler shared stories of their hosts. The giants of Thoth carry the ancestral blood of humans and giants alike. They once united with our ancestors to resist the custodians, forming what history knows as the Great Tartary. It was a powerful alliance, one that changed the course of our lands. Shiki returned, carrying an enormous book, which she handed to William. He opened it to find maps and diagrams of lands beyond anything he'd imagined. "This will help you understand the history," she said gently, watching his reaction. His hands shook as he turned the pages, glimpsing the known lands alongside vast territories marked with unfamiliar names and mysteries yet unexplored. "How many lands are there?" he asked in awe. "At least 178 worlds," she replied, "and countless others remain undiscovered." Butler added, "This doesn't include the islands and lands beyond." They stopped at a page marked Anunnaki lands. Shiki's expression turned serious. "The Anunnaki have always been hostile to humans and are bound by an ancient treaty with the custodians," she explained. William's heart pounded as he absorbed this knowledge. Each revelation deepened his sense that he was on the edge of understanding the truth of human origins, of a world far greater than he could ever have imagined. The giants' history lay buried and forgotten, as hidden as the bones of their ancestors. Their legacy, suppressed by the custodians, was one of resistance, a memory erased to prevent humans from discovering that they could challenge their unseen rulers. William pondered this lost greatness as he drifted into a restless sleep under a strange sky. his mind overwhelmed by the revelations of the past days. Morning brought clear skies, and Shiki, who led the group to a quiet corner, eager to share more of the giant's history. She opened a massive book, pointing to an illustration. The custodians and Anunnaki are colonizers, William. They operate by infiltrating worlds, circles as they call them, then exploiting them. Her voice dropped as she continued. They've mapped the known worlds and formed the old treaty to divide these lands and ensure control. William's curiosity burned. You mentioned domes. What exactly are they? Each world lies within its own dome, Shiki explained. These are invisible barriers separating each system, much like a cell's membrane. The circles are interconnected by portals, though they're difficult to find. But the custodians have fixated on one land they've never breached, the celestial lands. Why can't they enter it? William asked, his voice barely a whisper. Shiki hesitated. Their technology fails there. Every custodian and Anunnaki who entered was destroyed. Eventually, they discovered that the celestial lands aren't inhabited by physical beings, but by an energy, a force they call the Source. She paused, her gaze distant. They believe this source is conscious, perceiving the custodian's threat and responding to protect its environment. William's heart raced. And this source, what does it mean for us? Shiki continued. It's said the source created the 5 masters, who shaped humanity in lands like Asgard, Lemuria, and Atlantis, places deeply connected to the world beyond. This is why the custodians seek to control humans. If people knew their true origins, they'd find a strength the custodians couldn't contain. The history Shiki revealed left William in silent awe. The giants had watched humanity's plight, seeing how the custodians had hidden the truth of the source, the vital energy within each human, and manipulated entire civilizations to keep that knowledge buried. Shiki continued, her voice steady. The custodians and the Anunnaki have long known of this source, and for centuries they tried to unlock it. When they discovered Asgard's mountains rich with gold, they invaded, hoping to exploit the people and resources, but they found something unexpected. No matter how they tried, they couldn't control the energy that returned to the celestial lands upon human death. Frustrated, they sought other ways, sacrificing countless lives in blood rituals, plagues, and wars. Yet their grip on this energy remained elusive. William listened, his thoughts swirling with each revelation. So they used resets to weaken us, hoping to control humanity with disease, shortened lives, and lies. Shiki nodded. Yes, each reset rewrote history until people forgot their own potential. To them, humanity is a tool, a means to mine resources and construct monuments to their dominance. She explained how the custodians and Anunnaki grew divided, each vying for control of the known lands and its vast gold. Giants and human allies seized this moment, launching resistance forces from the free islands and the edges of the ice walls, forming what came to be known as Great Tartary. In that era, giants mingled with humans, forming armies and developing technology based on free energy, Shiki said. Pyramids and symbols of custodian rule were toppled as Tartary thrived, a force the custodians couldn't control. When the custodians returned from war, they found their former colony in chaos. A rebellion had sparked, with giants and humans fighting together against years of oppression. Over the years, giant humans had developed advanced defense technology, some derived from stolen custodian knowledge, transforming into a force the custodians never anticipated. They considered another reset to restore control, but their pyramids, once symbols of power, lay in ruins. Reluctantly, the custodians sought an alliance with the Anunnaki, trading gold and secrets to regain dominance. In their absence, however, they left the Greys, a race from Zeta Reticuli, as overseers. But the Greys, disgruntled and dismissive, underestimated humanity's resolve and the powerful alliance it had formed with the giants. The uprising spread across the known lands, with humanity and giants clashing against custodian forces in battles that scorched the earth. Even with ships in the air and powerful weaponry, the rebellion was crushed as custodians manipulated the environment itself, stirring storms and disasters in their favor. Seeing defeat as inevitable, the giants retreated, slipping north and south through passages beyond the walls. Some humans followed, escaping to lands outside the custodians' reach, a region known as the Ancestral Republic. Shiki's words echoed in William's mind. Those who fled the custodial grip began again. They connected with the source, rediscovering humanity's true past and purpose, vowing to free those left behind. Butler confirmed that the giants would not join their cause again. The last battle had cost them dearly, and they feared annihilation if they defied the custodians once more. As they prepared to leave, Butler warned William of the risk. Imagine returning to the known lands with this knowledge. They'd label you insane or worse. The custodians had perfected control, using the Greys to monitor minds, turning questioners into outcasts or prisoners. They departed, the weight of humanity's lost history with them. The night passed in strange silence, the air heavy with the weight of what William had learned from Shiki's book. The revelations, this idea that every human held a piece of the source, tied him to the countless souls lost in past resets, a lineage of lives erased and manipulated by the custodians. Morning brought a soft rain as their ship neared land, a gentle reminder of life as they glimpsed the sprawling city of El Arca on the horizon. The city's lights, glittering beneath a soft grey sky, promised a life beyond control, a place of peace and simplicity, untouched by custodian rule. Here, it seemed, humanity could live freely, without fear, pain, or the scars of exploitation. Yet William's heart sank with the bitter knowledge that those he'd left behind could never know this world. The captain encouraged them to explore, mentioning that currency held no value here. The Republic operated on a system beyond gold or wealth. As the others ventured into the city, William wandered alone, lost in thought under the pouring rain. He felt hollow, wondering how he could carry the weight of what he'd learned back to those still trapped within the custodian's grasp. Time drifted by, and the streets filled with the soft hum of voices and the music that spilled gently from the walls. People glanced at him with curious expressions, his foreign clothes a stark contrast to their sleek attire. One man tried to speak to him, but William, understanding nothing, could only murmur, "File," and follow the man's silent gesture toward a nearby building. By the time he returned to the port, he felt overwhelmed by both the wonders of this world and the pain of leaving others behind in ignorance. Butler arrived in a sleek vehicle, gesturing for him to get in, his face a rare glimmer of optimism. "We haven't secured direct help from the Anakim," Butler explained. "They fear risking their race again, but I think they'll aid us in time. Our recent battle has shown the custodians that the Republic's technology is very much alive. They came expecting easy victory, but we've made them retreat with a fear they won't forget." William nodded, a flicker of hope rising as Butler spoke. There was still a chance, but any step forward would require careful planning. With the Republic's advances and allies, perhaps there could be hope for those left behind. Butler's voice was steady as he addressed the group on the boat, his words carrying the weight of what they had learned. "This is our chance to change history," he announced, holding up a toast to their journey. Around him, faces brightened with the rare hope of an impending purpose, though William's heart remained heavy. He couldn't shake the questions that haunted him. Could they ever truly break free from the custodian's control? And if so, how many years within the ice walls would pass before any of it mattered? Sensing William's unease, Butler clapped him on the shoulder. "We'll do more for them from here," he said quietly, "than we could by going back to become easy prey for the custodians." The captain had been gathering resources, books on the language and workings of the Republic, knowing they would need every advantage to face what lay ahead. As days turned to years, William found himself immersed in this strange, timeless place, where the passage of time itself seemed slower, almost surreal. As his understanding of the Republic deepened, so did his influence. Eventually, he was appointed commander-in-chief of their naval force. Now he worked with others to devise ways of striking at the custodians, carefully, without risking the lives of innocents. Yet their strategies often hit dead ends. The custodians' bases in the known lands moved constantly, concealed by portals and hidden within fortified zones. Worse, the humans within the walls, conditioned for loyalty, would defend these barriers with their lives, unaware that they guarded the prison of their own kind. Meanwhile, William witnessed the Republic's harmonious society, free from material greed and devoid of crime. Leaders here did not rule for power, but served out of a genuine love for their people. The Republic's citizens valued simplicity, introspection, and spiritual growth. William began to understand the heart of the Republic lay in the concept they called death of the ego, a freedom from the identity traps that so often enslaved the mind. In stark contrast, he knew the known lands were structured to suppress this growth. The custodians had perfected systems to keep humans distracted and disconnected from their true potential. Paper money, national boundaries, even science itself, all twisted into tools to sever humans from their deeper selves, to keep them locked in a reality defined by materialism, consumption, and obedience. Butler voiced what William had come to understand. The true battle would always lie within each human soul, the struggle between love and the empty promises of power. A great dictatorship, born from greed and a lost sense of humanity, seemed inevitable if people could not find a way to value more than just survival. Butler and Fail arrived at dawn, their expressions tense yet resolute. They had crafted a new plan, one that held hope without risking the countless lives of those within and beyond the ice walls. The custodians had invested heavily in technology and weaponry, making them formidable. But their greatest vulnerability, Butler insisted, lay in their complete lack of spiritual understanding. "Intelligent, yes," he said, "but they fear what they can't control. We know they're still rattled by the existence of the ancestral humans and the Anakim, and though they have the firepower, they haven't attacked us in years. Why?" Their meetings stretched for hours, strategizing ways to infiltrate the known lands undetected. They'd learned of a custodial alert system set to detect ancestral presences, creating localized tremors anytime one neared the dome's passages. This seismic watch was precisely why the Republic had refrained from sending more operatives, relying instead on long-term agents embedded within the custodian system. Butler detailed the plan. "We'll attempt to enter via a narrow, overlooked entry, the summer portal. It's believed to bypass their sensors. From there, agents can spread information subtly, mention the Republic, hint at other lands, enough to plant doubt but not trigger alarm." He spoke of the whispers of freedom, a suggestion of hidden truths that might reach those ready to question. But it had to be done delicately. Many, he knew, would dismiss these ideas outright, too deep in the custodians' conditioning. Ironically, this dismissal gave them time to build momentum quietly. They discussed other methods, teaching spiritual techniques that could help humans break through their mental conditioning, methods the ancestors had once used to guide people beyond their controlled reality. Butler was insistent. "Only when enough minds awaken will these walls of ice become visible for what they are." Even so, they acknowledged the danger. Attempts to cross the ice walls could invite swift suppression, likely through fear tactics, or worse, military intervention. One morning, Butler and Fail stepped into the office with a determined air. They'd devised a new plan to reach the humans still trapped under the custodians' control. Direct confrontation was out of the question. It risked everything. The people within the walls, the ancestral humans of the Republic, and even nearby lands. Subtlety was their only chance. The custodians rely on weapons and tactics, Butler began, his voice sharp but steady. But they have weaknesses, like any other race. They've never understood the depths of spiritual strength. As they laid out the plan, it became clear just how meticulous it needed to be. The custodians had a sophisticated surveillance network near the dome entrances, one that detected even a single ancestral presence. This triggered tremors, alerting their forces immediately. It explained why certain areas always seemed to shake, and why sending more people through the known passages was too dangerous. Butler's gaze was steady. But there's one place they don't control completely, the summer portal. If it works, we could slip a few of us through, undetected. Once inside, the mission was to sow seeds of awareness. Subtle mentions of the Republic, hints of lands beyond the ice, whispers of humanity's real past. They didn't need specifics, only the ideas mattered. These fragments would ripple through society, one whisper at a time, until the truth could no longer be contained. They knew many would ignore these quiet revelations, too conditioned by generations of custodial influence. Yet paradoxically, this resistance gave them more time. And with time, they could launch a secondary effort, deep spiritual teachings that would awaken minds and open hearts. When enough humans break free of their conditioning, Butler said, they'll be ready to see what lies beyond the walls. They understood the risk, though. Sooner or later, explorers from the known lands would find these ice barriers, and the custodians wouldn't hesitate to crush any sign of rebellion through fear or force. The summer portal was an unexpected triumph. For years, the custodians remained oblivious to the quiet presence of ancestral teachers entering the known lands. Each teacher worked discreetly, teaching love, empathy, and the true power of the human soul, igniting small sparks of awareness. Yet Fail held strict orders. Butler and the core team were forbidden to enter. If they capture us, he'd warned, they'll use any method to extract our knowledge. One misstep, and the whole plan collapses. The mission was fragile, and when signs of manipulation appeared, teachings twisted for greed, messages distorted, they regrouped, adapting quickly to avoid detection. But Butler knew their tactics couldn't sustain this veil forever. As resistance grew, he planned the next phase carefully. A navigator from our lands will blend into their world, he explained, his voice carrying a solemn weight. He'll tell his story, speak of other lands, and hint at the Republic. They won't see it coming. The team understood. The message would be subtle, mingled with stories of familiar economic and social issues to avoid suspicion. The navigator arrived in the known lands, sharing his tale with those who dared listen. He spoke of strange maps, ancient histories, and even giant humans, just enough to plant curiosity. But soon, the custodians intervened. They altered his accounts, erased the most important details, and confined him, leaving only fragments of the truth behind. He returned to the Republic in haste, carrying warnings of the custodians' growing suspicions. With renewed urgency, the custodians turned to humanity itself, encouraging them to create technology beyond their spiritual readiness. The results were chaotic: wars, plagues, crises, all to distract, to control. Expeditions to Antarctica began, funded by leaders with direct ties to custodial power, while heliocentric teachings in schools cemented their grip. Bases were fortified along the icy ring, exclusion zones expanded, and silence blanketed the truth of the lands beyond. Then came word of Operation High Jump. The custodians had sent a military force, led by a man named Richard Byrd, to confront them directly. Though little news reached the surface world, the Republic knew of Byrd's intentions. The Anakim, committed to peace, tried to negotiate with Byrd's forces just beyond the dome. There, leaders from both sides met, a fragile truce hanging in the air. But Byrd soon revealed his true loyalties, selling secrets of the Anakim's technology to the custodians. Rumors spread that his cooperation had earned him a mission to Mars. Using humans as their foot soldiers, the custodians cleverly forced these ancient humans to confront their own past, without realizing the nature of the real enemy. As the custodians ramped up attacks within their society through disasters and wars, a faint tremor of doubt began to shake the very foundations they'd laid. But those tremors only grew. Ancient secrets, hints of infinite Earth and lands beyond the icy walls, began reaching those few who listened. And as the custodians tightened their grip, the Ancestral Republic prepared for what lay ahead. Their enemy's control was beginning to fray. The awakening, at long last, had begun. The final step loomed ahead, but it relied on one crucial element: the awakening of those trapped under custodial rule. They needed to see beyond their conditioning, to recognize the deception that bound them. Otherwise, any attempt to free them would only confirm their fear, casting their liberators as intruders and themselves as defenders of the very force that kept them enslaved. The custodial system was deeply rooted, ingrained in every aspect of their world. Even the air itself carried pollutants that dulled awareness, making true liberation seem a distant hope. Though resistance brewed in some circles, it wasn't yet strong enough to catalyze the change they needed. But then came the unexpected allies. Various races, sensing the danger and exhaustion of custodial rule, arrived offering their support. Among them, the Pleiadians, a race with advanced technology and spiritual wisdom, were keen to see the source freed and the custodians brought to their knees. The Pleiadians' own system was close to the mysterious lands beyond the second dome, and they had seen custodial tactics firsthand, especially the way they exploited humans and other races as pawns. It was a shared history of suffering that drew them to this alliance. The Pleiadians had nearly been driven to extinction under custodial control, but had miraculously regained their autonomy, becoming a flourishing, free society. Now, alongside their allies, they sought ways to infiltrate the lands where custodial control remained most fierce. Mars had become a staging ground for the custodians and Anunnaki, where multiple races lived under strict control. The human settlers there were part of the new humanity, reshaped after the last reset. Each of them had earned their place on Mars through acts of loyalty to the custodians, often at the expense of their own kind. That forsaken land, tainted by betrayal and bound by oppression, symbolized a cautionary tale for the future. In lands overlooked by custodial interests, life thrived quietly. These uncharted territories, untouched by colonizers, allowed different races to flourish. Over centuries, these areas became havens of peace until the period of the Great Pyramids, when the custodians turned their gaze back toward human lands. They transported humans to distant places, drugged and disoriented, disguising themselves as gods. Osiris, one of their leaders, established a colony in the depths of the abyssal ocean near the islands of Anubis, where he trapped a community of humans. His mission was clear: isolate these people, preventing them from ever discovering the ancient lands of Lemuria and Atlantis, where humanity's true origins lay hidden. The lands, Osiris claimed, bore his name and his influence. He taught the settlers agriculture and ingrained them with the custodial philosophy, all while keeping them under strict control. Being near the Orion Circle helped solidify his authority, especially as the Greys, who then served as an inferior custodial race, ensured compliance. The lands of Orion and the Greys were ruled by a race known as the Greys, beings who thrived in shadowed hostility, building their technology solely for war and domination. These creatures had little purpose beyond colonization, although their reach was limited. The nearby realm of Zeta Reticuli shared a similar history. Both lands early on brought under Anunnaki rule. For the Anunnaki, the Greys were ideal servants, emotionless, efficient, and obedient. The Greys had been sent on countless expeditions, exploring worlds as part of the Anunnaki's relentless search to map Terra Infinite. Their roles spanned reconnaissance, covert operations, and control, from the known lands to colonies on Mars. But in their attempt to control humanity during the Great Tartary era, the Greys failed. Humanity rose up, and vital information on the Great Dome slipped from the Greys' grasp. As a result, tension escalated between them and their custodial overlords. Small battles erupted, inadvertently aiding humanity and the Anakim, just before the custodians reconciled with their ancient allies, the Anunnaki. Some theorized that the Greys were a direct creation of the Anunnaki, an engineered race meant for servitude. Their survival depended on cloning, and their movements held a robotic precision, devoid of any hint of emotion. But the truth was stranger. They originated from the lands of Orion, a dome that the Anunnaki had penetrated and colonized. Despite their scientific prowess, the Greys had nearly been wiped out after their clash with the custodians. To avoid extinction, they resorted to cloning, sustaining themselves in this sterile existence. Their home, Orion, was lush with life, vast forests and fertile lands, teeming with a rich variety of plants and animals. It was one of the most fertile domes known, where life flourished naturally, unlike the barren lands held by the custodians. Ironically, this paradise had been the Anunnaki's first conquest. Over time, the fertile lands were twisted into the breeding grounds of a vast experiment as the custodians and Anunnaki imported other species, treating Orion like a celestial testing ground. Mars, once a spiritual haven, had also fallen under their shadow. The original beings of Mars, proud defenders of their homeland, fought to the end. Better death than servitude, the last Martian is said to have thought, as they chose self-annihilation over a life under colonization. The Anunnaki, unburdened by regret, took Mars as a second home. And soon, with the treaty between the custodians and Anunnaki in place, Mars became yet another testing ground where beings from countless races mingled and clashed. The first human colony on Mars was established in a region known as Area, where the fertile soil promised a new start. But peace was brief. Soon, humanity was drawn into a series of bitter territorial battles with other races. The custodians and Anunnaki watched with grim satisfaction as Mars became a stage for unending conflict, a twisted spectacle of violence and struggle. In time, the human settlers were driven from Area to a nearby island, their numbers dwindling. Years later, a new player entered the scene, Richard Byrd. Under orders from his custodial leader, Nimrod, Byrd crossed the South Pole, flanked by US Navy soldiers and powerful figures from secret societies. In crossing, Byrd forged a passage that now bears his name. But it was more than just an expedition. It was another incursion, another attempt to exert custodial control over worlds yet undiscovered. In the heart of Argaea, a gateway to the Anunnaki lands lay hidden. Today, this region flourishes, free from open conflict, a place where humans are occasionally granted entry as a reward for their service to the custodians. Those lucky enough to settle here find their bodies rejuvenated, living longer and healthier lives than they could in the known lands, where the air grows thick with toxins, polluted by the system they serve. One day, William sat on the shore of El Arca, watching the waves roll in and out, his gaze stretching far beyond the horizon. The sea lapped at his feet, cool and steady, grounding him even as his mind drifted back to memories of his homeland. Faces flickered in his mind, loved ones, many long gone, their lives bound to the earth he had left behind. He wondered if they thought him dead, lost to his madness for distant lands. Yet he'd left them a message, a whisper of his true path, so they might know he hadn't simply vanished. He could feel the years pressing against him, the familiar weight of age that should have come years ago. Though he looked no older than 50, there was a creeping weariness within him, an ache that hinted his time was short. Staring into the fading light, he asked himself silently, would I die here, in these beautiful but distant lands? As the sun sank lower, casting the world in hues of red and gold, William lay back on the sand, his body racked by the relentless pain, 1,000 needles piercing his skin. He looked to the sky where the stars appeared like distant companions. How many, he murmured to himself, have died waiting, never knowing what love and peace truly felt like. His voice was lost to the gentle night breeze. Around him, the members of his team had dwindled, each one taken by the pollution they'd carried from within the walls. Just then, Butler approached and laid a hand on William's shoulder, his eyes filled with understanding. "Hold on, William," he murmured, his voice a steady anchor. "Freedom's close now. They're scrambling, desperate. A new pandemic is on the horizon, and they're tightening their grip, but we've prepared for this. Ancestors are entering the known lands daily now, slipping in undetected. We're going to use their own weapons against them. Soon they'll realize, and by then, they'll be too late to stop it." William felt a flicker of hope. "They'll see the truth," Butler continued, his voice unwavering. "They'll see the lies, the control, the poison they've been forced to swallow. And then, we'll show ourselves. With the Anakim watching the walls day and night, we'll be ready. This time can't fail. If it comes to it, we'll get as many out as we can. But you..." He squeezed William's shoulder, eyes locked with a fierce resolve. "You must hold on, old friend. You've waited this long. Resist a bit more, so you can see our people free." William nodded, handing Butler the notes he'd carefully written since leaving the United States. In these pages, he'd captured the journey, the incredible places, the hidden landscapes, the glimpses of true happiness and love. "Let these be my words to those within the walls," he whispered, "a message of hope for those yearning to know the truth." He felt a tremor seize his body, the pain surging again. He lay still, eyes fixed on the vast sky, watching as silver blue ships, the iron blues, cut across the heavens in swift arcs. "Where are you going?" he wondered, as the stars blurred in his vision. "Is it time to awaken them all? Are we ready?" Then a quiet resolve settled within him. The message he would send was simple, steady, pulsing through his mind like a heartbeat. These lands exist. We're here, waiting. The battle is real, and it's within. Resist, and freedom will come. We're waiting to guide you all.